Welcome, my name is Heidi Kramer and I'm the Assistant Director for Public Services here at the Newark Public Library. And it is my honor tonight to welcome you to the, and guys, gonna have to remind me, the 10th in our series, 10th Newark Lifetimes Recollections and Reflections program. And it's wonderful to have Guy Sterling, a wonderful friend to the library, retired Star-Ledger reporter, historian, and author in his own right, be with us, organize these programs for us, and host and moderate these programs for us. And I always leave the next announcement to Guy so he can talk about, what's coming in December. But it has been an absolutely wonderful year of programming. We will have a wonderful celebratory conclusion to the series in December, so I welcome you all to come back at that time. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Guy.
Don't stop now. Okay. I'm assuming everyone can hear me.
Yes.
Just in case you were wondering what you were hearing, this is the 1955 very famous shrine concert from Los Angeles that featured any number of top gospel groups at the time. It's a classic CD. I'm listening to it. It's the one I pull out first when I'm interested in listening to gospel music. So good evening, and thank you for coming tonight. My name is Guy Sterling, and as Heidi said, this is the 10th and next to last program in the Newark Lifetime series that I've organized and moderated here at the Newark Public Library this year in connection with the city's 350th anniversary celebration. I could be mistaken, but I believe this is the only live program that's encompassed the entire anniversary year from January to December. I would like to thank the library staff, most particularly Tom and Heidi, for being so supportive and so enthusiastic in hosting this event each month. Without them, this could not have been done. The final program to round out the year is set for Wednesday evening, December 7th, and it will be a one-on-one conversation between myself and Mayor Baraka. There are flyers for that program on the table by the door. So please take one home with you as a reminder of the date. December 7th, Pearl Harbor Day, Mayor Baraka. I promise no fireworks. And again, you never know. As those of you who've been here with me before know, each of our programs has had a theme. So far, we've had guests here talking about politics, government, sports, writing, art, and a number of other topics. Tonight's topic will be gospel music, and I'm very pleased to have with us Dr. Stefanie Minatee and Dr. Albert Lewis, each one a formidable figure in the world of gospel music. These are two people who are known not just in Newark and in New Jersey, but throughout the country, and even the globe, for their contributions to gospel music. And the fact that we can call both of them Newarkers, born and raised, is something we can all be extremely proud of. We all like to think about Newark as one of America's preeminent jazz towns in light of the incredibly fertile jazz scene that thrived here from the 1920s through the 1970s and produced the likes of Sarah Vaughan, James Moody, and Wayne Shorter. And if you gave me a little time, I could also make the case why I think the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame should be here in Newark and not Cleveland. But equally important is the gospel music scene that has been here for many years and thankfully continues today. In a very real sense, it is a survivor in Newark at a time when jazz, blues, R&B, and other kinds of music have waned. But like all vital artistic forms, gospel music has evolved over time, and we'll hear about that evolution tonight from our guests, as well as something about gospel music's tradition here in Newark. So with that, please welcome our guests, Dr. Stefanie Minatee, Director of the Grammy Award-winning Jubilation Choir, and Dr. Albert J. Lewis, founder of the World Gospel Music Association, and executive producer and host of the nationally syndicated Dr. A. Lewis Gospel Hour. How am I doing so far?
Awesome.
Awesome. Can you just check your mics to make sure they're okay? Is my mic's coming through okay?
Test.
Okay. So, I thought, since, there's a diversity of people here tonight, I thought I would start with the question that most teachers, particularly in law school, like to start their classes with earlier in the year, and that's defining your terms. So, very briefly, if each of you could give us a definition of gospel music, so we all have an idea what the concept is as we move forward through our program tonight. And the reason I ask that is because in preparation for this program, I did a lot of reading. And in that process, I found out that gospel music is an umbrella term. There are all different types of gospel music, just like jazz has its bebop, its hard bop, its post bop, its fusion, its mainstream. Rock music has its heavy metal, its acid rock, its hard rock, its soft rock. Well, gospel music has its forms as well. We're going to talk about this, but I was astonished to find out that, not that there were different types of gospel music, but I never knew there was bluegrass gospel. Does anyone here know bluegrass gospel? Yes? I lived in southwestern Virginia for 4 years in the late 70s in bluegrass country, and I was not familiar with bluegrass gospel, but there is gospel blues, bluegrass gospel, I'm sorry, British black gospel, southern gospel, progressive southern gospel, Christian gospel. And I say Christian gospel because I think my first baptism with Christian gospel was when I was living in southwestern Virginia. I went to see Elvis Presley. And if you recall, Elvis came out of a gospel tradition, a Christian gospel tradition. But with him on stage that night were the Sweet Inspirations from Newark. Sissy was not with them. Sissy was with the Sweet Inspirations and Elvis up until the time of his 69 and his month-long engagement in Las Vegas when he had his big comeback concert. But he also had a group called J.D. Sumner and the Stamps, which was a Christian gospel music. So here you had a black gospel group, a white gospel group, coming from different gospel traditions, and that really piqued my interest. So that's one of the things we're going to get into tonight as we talk about gospel music and different types of gospel music. But I would like each of our guests tonight just to start off by giving us their idea, their conceptualization of what gospel music is, and then we'll get into some specific questions about their lives in gospel music. So whoever would like to take this one first and wrestle with it a little bit?
Well, gospel music is the good news. The word gospel means sharing the good news. So we share the good news of Jesus Christ through song. Gospel means good news for bad times, and we certainly have some of those. But if we share gospel music, the load will get a little lighter, and people will not forget about their bad times, but it will help them to survive their times and make it through. So gospel music to me is good news.
And you would say that would carry through all the different forms of gospel?
Absolutely. If you have the term gospel attached, it ought to be about good news.
Dr. Lewis, you want to give that a shot?
Good news, gospel. Well, the early gospel singers and writers sat down and they would read through the Bible, and they would take stories, those kind of interesting things, basically the your situation, your problems were, the same God yesterday is the same God today. And so they wrote these songs out of the Bible. We have Dorothy Love Coates, and I can get into Sally Martin and the great Martin singers. They sung songs out of the Bible. I spoke with, just before she died, one of the legendary singers of the Caravan, Inez Andrews. We were in Atlanta, Georgia for the Thomas A. Dorsey Convention, which I am a very proud member of and board member. And as she was leaving the stage, I said to her, what would you completely think about this music today, opposed to the music of our time? And she simply said that, well, you know, young people don't read the Bible. And to a degree, that's very true. Young people have not lived long, so they can't tell their history or stories of processing living. And when you live long, you can certainly talk about what yesterday is. Young people only talk about today. And she said because they don't read and because they like beat, they like the feel and texture of music, they pin words to that. And she said most times that's not gospel. She said, now, it may sound inspirational, but it's not gospel. Donnie McCurdy even said that same thing when he was asked about gospel. It's such a thing as jazz gospel, blues gospel, rock and roll gospel. And Donnie McCurdy made a very profound statement, which I've been saying for the longest. Certainly I've been on television for 34 years, and I've had very fast. A lot of this is not really gospel. It's really just inspirational. And yet you need to know the difference between what is inspirational and what is gospel. Gospel music really has a different texture, has a different sound. When you hear it, like what we just heard, you know that's gospel. Because again, it has a different texture and a different sound. But traditional music is something a little different. It's not bad music, it does give inspiration, but we have to be very, very careful how we label gospel. Thomas A. Dorsey, yes, he took blues because he was a blues pianist, songwriter, Ma Rainey, and all those people who were with him. But when he was converted, of course, he took words from the Bible and he mixed it into that kind of music, which gave that real title today, gospel music. That's where it all stems from. But the real theologians, the real musicologists, and those persons who have studied the art and science of this will tell you what gospel music is. So when you hear it, I know Elvis Presley did Precious Lord, Take My, he did Amazing Grace. Well, that was a gospel song, really. It actually was a hymn, it was a hymn. But we wouldn't call that a gospel song, we would call it, but originally the nature of it was a hymn. And he just took it because this was part of his religious background and he wanted to sing it. So when people say gospel music to me, because I go to the Thomas A. Dorsey, I even see the young kids that are there by the thousands, they have to learn one of Thomas A. Dorsey's 147 songs that he wrote. They have to learn one. And they can sing contemporary music after that, because we're trying to teach young people to know what the foundation of what they're building their music on. This is the foundation. What you just heard tonight is gospel music.
Okay. So
Good news.
huh?
And they say good news.
Amen. So let's get into some of the specifics here. As I have done with all of my programs, I talk with my guests first. I interview them. We have a conversation about our subject matter. And I'd like to start with Dr. Lewis, if I could, because we talked about his parents who met here in Newark and married in 1942. His father was from Asbury Park. His mother was from Newark, though the family had been from Charleston, South Carolina. And what I took from our conversation about his parents was that, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it seemed to me that your dad instilled you with a very strong work ethic, but that your gospel music inspiration came from your mother. Now, let me just tell you a little bit about Dr. Lewis's mother. It was Hattie Fields Lewis from Charleston. Her mother was Victoria Graham Fields, and they, along with two other members of the family, were members of the Fields Gospel Singers, who were a very well-known group here in Newark, and not just in Newark, because they traveled and performed, and they performed with many of the big gospel names of the day. The Lewis family joined in the 1950s, joined the Israel Memorial AME Church in Newark, and Hattie became the lead soprano in adult choir. So there are probably few people in Newark who have the gospel pedigree that you do. Could you just talk briefly about how important that inspiration was, that those, that the family tradition in gospel music was in bringing you to gospel music?
I was born in 1946, and coming along, I always remember the age of captivity. About 5 or 6, my parents always were going to church. My father was in church at that time. They were going to Israel Memorial Church. Israel Memorial was a Methodist church, and in those days, Methodist churches did not give in to tamarines, fast singing, and hand clapping and swaying. That was a no-no in the church. But Israel Memorial was a kind of unique Methodist church because my mother would sing the lead in the choir. And her favorite song was "You're Not the Temptation." And when she would sing, she would lift her hands up, and I can always remember her doing it. She would lift her hands up, and she would sway. And of course, a lot of them didn't like that because that was not part of the tradition. But over the years, I began to see them begin to sing rock, coming down in the processional, opposed to just, we'll march to Zion, beautiful. That was the traditional procession of most churches back then. Zion. Well, eventually they were real and Sister Clark, who was the organist who read music, she could only play when she read it. But for whatever reason, she began to play a little bit more faster. And she started adding some ad-lib chords. And it took the church into a whole different dimension. And I saw that, and that always amazed me. Seeing my mother sing, my family come together as singers. Sunday afternoons was the highlight where they had gospel music events, and other groups would come. The Morgan singers would come, the Antioch gospel singers would come, the Flanagan gospel, these are singers of yesteryear. Even the drinkers, singers would come. It was just amazing to see all of these singers, Leon Christmas, who nobody ever wanted to play in their churches because when he sat to a piano, he was called the wild man. Now, it made sense because it was gospel music. Joe Morgan, who played for some of the groups, especially was a very well-known organist, but they didn't want him to play the organ because he was too loud. But gospel music then in Newark was starting to get a real foothold in the churches, especially the Methodist churches. And so throughout the years of witnessing this, with my mother singing and traveling, and my going with them, and then my Aunt Anna Lundy Lewis, great organist, teacher, who took me with her to Symphony Hall. I saw David Jackson. I saw so many the Blind Boys. This impacted my life, and I wanted to be a part of it. And so at the age of 7, I started teaching and learning to play through my aunt, Miss Lewis.
And I should have mentioned earlier that as part of this pedigree that Dr. Lewis has, his Uncle Pete was a drummer who he reminded me played at a club on Washington Street where Jackie Gleason, the comedian, was the band leader. And of course he briefly mentioned his aunt, Madam Anna Lundy Lewis, who is the mother of Yvette Glover, Savion Glover's grandmother, the former music minister at New Hope Baptist, Doris Dukes.
New Point.
Okay. I stand corrected by Walter. You can't get anything by Walter. Also was Doris Dukes' piano teacher. So this is quite a pedigree. But and we'll just stick with Dr. Lewis for one more question, because I want to bring up something. But before I get into that question, I want to just kind of locate him geographically in Newark. His first recollections are that his family lived on Kinney Place, which was kind of behind where the old Star Ledger building is. He went to Cole Place School.
No, Kinney Place. It's off of Kinney Street.
Off of Kinney Street, okay.
Between Washington and Halsey, just one block.
Okay. And Bergen Street School, Chancellor Avenue School, Wheelway High School. But something that struck me when we spoke the other day was about, and we could talk about this briefly, was about how his aunt did take him under her wing for his piano lessons at a young age, but Dr. Lewis was a child preacher and was preaching at 10 and 11 years old. So it's one thing, I think, to be in the church at 10 or 11, but preaching at 10 or 11 has got to be a whole different experience. Can you talk a little bit about, what led you to preaching at such an early age?
I always had an interest in gospel.
And performing too, by the way. Piano.
I always had an interest. I was intrigued of preachers, the gospel, and the delivery and the stories they would tell, and how it moved people, and it moved me. And at that early age, of course, you mimic to what you see. I understood the call in my life, but I wanted to attach myself to what I saw and to what I heard. And so I was able to develop my own technique, my own personality. Preaching, if you remember the old Springfield Avenue, it was considered church row. There were churches, in churches, on top of churches, next to churches. It was just churches. And as a young kid, because of my parents singing in a lot of these churches, I would go, and my mother always would ask me to stand up and introduce the group at the age of 11 or 12. And because I would use that preacher tone, my sisters and brothers, I present to you God's anointed singers. A lot of churches would say, "He'll preacher." My mother would say yes, and I found myself coming back on a Sunday morning, a Sunday afternoon. So that's how it began with me preaching, singing, and basically being a minister of music at the age of 12, serving as that musician for that particular church at the time.
So Stefanie took a little different path to gospel music. She grew up in Southport, graduated of McCall Avenue School and Arts High School in 1975. And she told me when we spoke that Arts High School then, probably now, was very competitive, and that she played the clarinet and had to audition playing the clarinet to get into the school. And she did not start singing until college. At that point, after high school, she stopped playing the clarinet, but she told me that she still at times envisioned the fingering of the clarinet, so that early musical education obviously has remained with her and is, I'm sure, important to her. She mentioned to me that one of the seminal moments in her development as a musician was career day at Arts High School when Melba Moore came back to speak to the school, the pupils, and helped Stefanie realize that she could take her music, love of music and music education into the schools and become a school musical instructor, which she did for 30-some-odd years at Plainfield High School in Union County, Plainfield. And she had several choirs down there. The advanced choir, which traveled all over the world to sing. So that's, you know, when Stefanie kind of started not only with her own musical inspiration, but also in choirs with school children. But it was that discussion with Melba Moore that day that influenced her to become a teacher, and she went on to get her bachelor's degree from Kane College in musical performance. She has a master's from the Drew Theological School, and she has a doctorate from seminary in Dayton, Ohio. Her mother was a friend of Sarah Vaughan's. Her grandmother was a friend of Sarah's mother, Ada. Stefanie was a member of the Mount Zion Baptist Church. Went there with her grandmother as a teenager. Her father and her grandmother remained there. She never worked there musically, but it was when she went to First Baptist in Nutley, Reverend Roberts Church, where things really started to open up for her. And she became a mentor of Reverend Lawrence Roberts, who is a pivotal figure in gospel music, not just here in Newark, New Jersey, but nationwide. And he's a Newarker. Unfortunately passed a few years ago, but definitely left his mark. So Stefanie, if you could just take us briefly through this evolution of you being a clarinet player to a teacher, and then into the arms and the spirit and the heart of Reverend Roberts and everything that he instilled in you to lead you to become the gospel music figure that you are today.
Sure. You know, going to Arts High School, well, first I could go, you know, my parents wanted me to go to a school that I could accelerate in and that would be challenging to me. So we thought about it, and I auditioned. You had to audition to get in Arts High School. You couldn't just go there. You had to audition. So Mr. Pearson, William Pearson, who was my music teacher for many years, he arranged for me to audition. And I was able to get in Arts High, and then I started playing clarinet. And it was very competitive. You had to move up in chairs. I started as a third chair clarinet player, and I ended up a first chair because I wasn't going to be outdone. So I worked hard, and I remember the hardest thing and the best thing to learn if you have kids that are trying to learn music was the Sousa marches. We practiced John Philip Sousa marches profusely. I can still sing bum ba da bum bum da 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 da. It's in my head. because that's all I heard was Sousa marches. So I would practice those marches, moved up and played in marching band in high school. But then went to Kane College because I don't even know how I started. I was always singing. You know, I was in the gospel choir at our time. So when I got to Kane College, my mother did not think that music was you were gonna make any money in music. She said, no, you got to do something else because you're not going to succeed. I'll make money but not succeed, but you're not going to make any money in music. So I was a speech and hearing major. You know, to appease my aunt, that's my mother and my aunt, that was close, you know, using your ears in speech and hearing. Okay. I went there and hated it. I hated speech and hearing. And when I had to take a course called the Anatomy and Physiology of the Ear, I was like, I'm mostly going over to the music department. And the music department was across campus. And the rest is history. I studied the voice in the music department there for 4 years, got my degree. And you know, I learned to sing in all different languages. You had to learn all instruments. So I'm certified to teach music vocally, and I'm certified to teach instrumentally. It was a wonderful experience. Every year we go on tour and tell other people about what was going on at the college. But the First Baptist Church of Nutley is where I really grew up. My mother was a member of the world famous Angelic Choir who recorded Peace Be Still among other things, and they got a Grammy for Peace Be Still, but she went to Nutley following this man named Reverend Lawrence Roberts. You know, we were going to church up in North Newark, and she said, but Lawrence is going to pastor up in Nutley, so I'm gonna go up there. So I went, you know, because at that age, you just do what your mother said. You don't have anything to say about what you're doing. You just follow. So I followed her to Nutley, and I stayed in Nutley for the duration, for a really, really long time. I would listen to Reverend Roberts when he would just preach, and he would sing, and he would play, and we'd have different people coming to visit the church. You know, he was a producer for Savoy, the first black gospel producer that Savoy had. So we'd have artists coming to the church, and I was like, wow, this is happening. Wow. And then I got my education, of course, in college, and he talked to me, and some other people talked to me. They wanted to start a young adult choir, because the Angelic Choir was the choir. They was the rage at the church. But the young people, we want to sing too. There's some young people in the audience, young adults in the audience. We want to sing too. You know, my mother and them, they were really, really good, but we had something to say. So he let me start the young adult choir at the First Baptist Church of Nutley. We were the children of the Angelic Choir, or the nieces or the nephews. And that's how the young adult choir got started, and it was a traumatic experience. It was a great experience because I learned so much dealing with people. I just can't say enough about how that changed my life. How standing before a group of people changed my life. So I am grateful for that experience, because had it not been for that experience, I probably would not have the Jubilation Choir, which I have now, and just be doing what I'm doing musically. And I wouldn't have the zeal and the zest to fight back from a stroke that I had in April 2015. But because of the fight it put in me, and the God I serve, I'm here today.
That's right. That's right.
took herself and you to First Baptist from Mount Zion. Mount Zion was no slouch in terms of gospel music. I mean, I used to have a choir there, and I would go to their parties and sit and you know, every party they had would always wind up in a sing fest, song fest, whatever. And I would just sit back and be totally astounded. But your mother wanted to take it to another level.
Because she was a member of, Reverend Roberts had a choir called the Voices of Faith, which was a community group that my mother was a member of. And then when he got called to pastor in Nutley, the Voices of Faith, many of those members became angelic choir members. So she went to Nutley with him. And yes, I love Mount Zion. You know, I mean, I can still hear Lillette Jenkins playing that piano. You know, I can still hear Let Mount Zion Rejoice. You know, so it was an influence. But as God would have it, Nutley was the place where I spent most of my time.
Well, I think any of us who heard Lillette Jenkins or knew Lillette Jenkins knew what a wonderful human being she was, beyond how good a musician she was.
Right.
If you remember, when Sarah Vaughan died, I covered the funeral for the Star-Ledger. That's where I first met Lillette. And there were all sorts of rumors about who was going to come and sing. You know, maybe Jesse Norman or Kathleen Battle or someone of that nature. And in the end, it was really the only musical accompaniment that service had beyond the choir was Lillette playing acoustic versions of some of Sarah Vaughan's songs. And from my viewpoint, I would think that I don't know if you could have gotten better than that. I mean, even if there'd been someone singing and it was just because, you know, that's what the family wanted, that's what the church wanted. It was just off the charts, really. I want to bring Dr. Lewis back into the conversation here for a moment, and I want to go back a little bit to the era when your mother performed, because if you could just talk a little bit about that, because it was in succeeding years, if I'm correct, that gospel music started to have this transition. But you remember a time when gospel music was very much along the lines of the music that we heard here to start tonight's program from 1955. Now, you had mentioned that the Fields Gospel Singers had Reverend Harry Spellman of the Macedonian Church of Christ on North Broad Street as their manager. So he was able to get them engagements, but it really was not only a different time in gospel music, but it had to be very formative for you, not only in seeing what your mother was going through in her performances and with the group, but also going and partaking of the performances themselves.
Dr. Spellman was one of those individuals that has such a unique personality. He can charm the very socks off of you. And because of complexion, light skin, coming out of Bethany Baptist Church, and knew about Bethany Baptist Church at that time, everyone was of a light color. And as he began to come into the gospel as a preacher, he was making inroads in these various churches throughout the community, and he would take my mother's group, go to Field Gospel Singers and present it. I saw that, saw how people accepted the music, because I think what was happening at that time, and I should say I believe what was happening at that time, the shift was beginning to take a turn for gospel music. People didn't mind the hymns, they didn't mind the anthems because that was of the era. But they wanted something a little more lively in the church, should we say, spirited in the church. When the church is spirited, people give more money. When the church is spirited, people attend church much better. where the church is scripted, folks won't fall asleep easily. And so, several other churches, such as Abyssinian Baptist Church, one of the churches that opened its doors to the caravans, and I remember that very clearly. Greater Harvest was one of those churches that opened its doors to the Martin Singers. Symphony Hall opened its doors to Ronnie Williams, one of the main gospel promoters of the day, who would bring Mahalia Jackson in, and you make the blind boys, you name them, he brought them, and he would pack Symphony Hall over 3,000 seats. Tickets were sold, and the place was packed. People came. My aunt would drag me with her. And she would, where are we going, Auntie? We're going to Symphony Hall, because she was one of the performers herself. She performed at that time with Reverend Lucas, who had a Christian temple up on Central Avenue in Newark, right above my church that I was originally a member of at first, Apostle Arturo Skinner, the Deliverance, and my aunt played there. And so she would drag me with her because they were going to sing. I would be behind stage. I would see these people. Hey Jackson, hey Anna, how you doing, baby? And my aunt would call her Haley. That was going to choke them at it. Hey Haley, well girl, you put on a few pounds, didn't you?
Tell us what it was like to see Mahalia Jackson in concert. That's what I'm curious about.
Well, she didn't want to sing at first until she got all her money. And I remember sitting in the back, like a, yes, Lord.
She won't sing until the money is in front on stage.
Mom Mabel said, when the money stopped, I stopped. Well, I was sitting there, and Mahalia Jackson came out to Ronnie Williams, and she said, when am I going on? He said, well, you know, I'm going to put you on as the front line. People will stay. She said, Ronnie, you have my money? No, I'm going to still counting. She said, well, I'm going to sit right here. And so he paid me all my money. And I was sitting there looking, because you know, back in those days, I mean, they were, and now I see them as historians. Then they were just people in the industry of music. Robert Williams left. He wouldn't come back until I don't know where he went, but when he came back, he was all sweaty. This man had to weigh about at least 300 pounds. And he was sweating. And he said, hey, money. It was pen. It was a little brown envelope. And guys, she sat there and she counted every dollar. Every dollar. And when she knew that she was well taken care of, what stood out in my mind is that she did like this. I'm ready to sit down. Call me now. Call me when I feel good, because if you don't call me when I'm really good, I'm about to go. But just to see that and to think about today that I have the opportunity to touch and sit next to these legendary people. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it impressed on my spirit to come into this industry. Now, of course, I don't get paid all the time. But I do because I love the Lord and I love the work of the Lord and I am taken care of. But to be able to do this for 34 years, being the second longest running television program nationally, means something to me. It means that it's my good friend Dr. Bobby Jones has retired. After 35 years, I knew he was going to retire. Because BET really wanted him to retire. That's the real thing. They wanted a new face, fresh face, young face. So that's why said he was retired. But I told him, well, I'm independent. I own my own show. So I'll be retired when I'm ready to retire.
So we're going to get into that a little bit later, Dr. Lewis, but I still want to focus a little bit on this, what they call the golden age of gospel music in the 40s and 50s, when Mahalia Jackson would come to Newark and headline a show at Symphony Hall, and it was a big deal because, as you say, every seat in the house was sold. But tell us a little, I'm very curious about Ronnie Williams because, you know, Newark has had some great promoters over the years. I knew Teddy Powell used to do the jazz and the R&B shows. Teddy was an interesting man. But I was not really familiar with Ronnie Williams, who was the gospel promoter in Newark. And I suspect that there are a lot of people in the audience who aren't familiar with him either. But in bringing these shows here, he served, you know, a major purpose. Tell us a little bit more about him. You say he was a big man. How often did he have shows?
He was a big guy. He was a big guy. Now, Ronnie was not always very honest in business. But because that he had the ability to bring in top gospel performers that back in the time we didn't see them on television, you just purchased their music, you know. We didn't have TV programs where you could see gospel performers. So you would hear WNJR on Sunday mornings, you know. My pastor turned the radio on. That helped us prepare and get dressed and get ready for church. You would hear the blind boys. You would hear these famous Faye Adams, shake her hand, shake her hand. The sister of her name just got out of my head, but her and Mr. Wagner, all of them were ill company. But to be able to hear these singers on radio, you often wonder what they look like. So he had the ability to bring them to Symphony Hall, and of course, in that time, everybody had a radio. He didn't have a television. Everyone was on their way to church to listen to WNJR or Yeah, there was another radio station because of Bernie's Bass. Thank you, Bernie's Bass, and my aunt were on that radio station. So, but you could listen to the Highway to Heaven Gospel Showcase and the Coleman Brothers. You would listen to them and the Coleman and all that, Walking Up the Milky White Way and all of those songs. So when these guys came to town, you wanted to see what you've been hearing. So that was the excitement for me, to be able to see these people walk across where I was sitting, going out to the left, to the stage, come back, going to their dressing rooms. Gospel music in those days was at a high pitch when people really enjoyed the music, and because of the Ronnie Williams and the Jenkins Holmans and the Howard Russells and those people who came along, did such a fantastic job at making a presentation. Then they began to filter into the churches. So if Symphony Hall can pack itself, why not have Sunday afternoon programs? Why not have Saturday night programs? And just bring these performers in town. And at that point, and it was around the 50s, early 50s, when gospel music was really getting a foothold in the city of Newark.
I'm kind of curious about this split between the time when you talk about gospel music becoming livelier and the time when it was more rooted in hymns and anthems, because it seems to me that there's a Sister Rosetta Tharpe was a figure who kind of, was a kind of a bridge from the anthem music to the livelier music, and there was a period in the 40s when Sister Rosetta, who was really a major figure in American music, and I think is deserving of much greater attention. It was a time when she was, I'm not going to say banished from the church, but her music was not accepted in many churches because it was thought to be too lively.
It was
of course, she was very lively.
It was bluesy, And again, remember I said that back in the day, they didn't, anything other than a piano or organ was accepted in the church.
Right.
So when you came in with a guitar,
And
and then you were this bluesy sound, well, that just didn't sit too well with the...
I mean, she was playing rock music. It was, you know, I mean, I guess in her mind it was gospel music, but you could look at it today and almost say it was rock music before Chuck Berry, before Little Richard, before, you know, all those early so-called rock stars.
Wyatt T. Walker wrote in his book, and if you get a chance, about gospelized hymns, because I heard you mention the word hymns. And hymns were written by Europeans, originally. And what the black church did was take that European hymn and embellish upon what they heard. So that is now called a gospelized hymn because black people did that. So it's important to note hymns are not really the same to you or to me because I hear them differently. So when you get a chance, you can read about Wyatt T. Walker and gospelized hymns. It's very knowledgeable. And you know, I'm much younger than Albert. So I really don't know about what he's, you know, the era that he talks about so vividly. I remember hearing the name Ronnie Williams. Yes. You know, we young people heard of who he was. But we never got a chance to meet him. And you're right, I did hear that he was unscrupulous. Yes. You know, but he was a great promoter, and his name will live in infamy for being that promoter. But let me just get back to the hymns just for you.
Sure.
Just a little bit. You know, any hymn that you would pick, like Amazing Grace. You know, Elvis did not sing Amazing Grace as written. He gospelized it. Okay? Or just a closer walk with thee. Just a closer walk with thee. I remember hearing Elvis sing that song. He gospelized that as well. He added embellishments onto what was written on the paper. See, a lot of churches a long time ago, you couldn't bring instrumentation into the church. They wanted to do music just as it was written. And when you started bringing organs, when you started bringing in tambourines, drums, all of that was frowned upon in years ago because people wanted to stay
traditional.
No, well, I won't use the word traditional. I will use as written, as written. Okay. So when they saw this stuff coming in, you know, you bring in rock and roll in the church. You know, we see drums in the clubs. You know, we see these instruments played in the clubs, not in the church. So that's why.
I wish that one of our guests tonight could have been the great, my friend, I love him dearly, Professor Dr. Robert Banks.
Yes.
Robert came to my television show and we did a conversation on how the hymns became gospelized. And he would sit at the piano and he showed you how it was written. And he played it exactly the way it was written. And then he showed me, or us who were viewing, how you were able to add a fifth note and a different straight beat, didn't you? As just a closer walk. Just a closer walk with thee. If you're singing in the hymn book. Well, he said, now this is how we interpret this music in gospel. Just a closer walk with thee. And that opened my eyes to how the transition was coming in. I heard it, but I needed a technician, a musicologist, to really give me more depth on the transition of it. My aunt Lewis said to me something too. She said, we were playing gospel before Thomas A. Dorsey named it gospel. And I asked, what do you mean by that? She said, because at times I would hear it when the choir was singing the morning opening hymn. I heard it. She said, I'm reading the music, but I wanted to throw something else in there, another chord, an ad-lib, just to liven up the song. And she said, when I would do that, she said, the choir had his eyebrows arched, because they knew that wasn't supposed to be there. But she said, for some reason, eventually, they began to like it, and they began to sing it with fervor. So the transitional period of here, I don't know anywhere else I can only talk about seeing it happen here.
Stefanie, from Plainfield High School, where you taught for 32 years and had a choir of high school kids, you were able to transition into something bigger, something professional, something worldwide, something that's still in existence, something that won all sorts of awards. Could you talk to us a little bit about how the Jubilation Choir came into being, some of the high points, and where it is now?
Well, my uncle, Councilman Donald Tucker, or Assemblyman Donald Tucker, who I miss immensely, he was on the board for NJPAC when it was built. And he knew Larry Goldman well, that was the CEO of NJPAC. I see Jeremy in the back. Hey, Jeremy, in Jubilation. So we met with, he said, I have a niece that's in doing music, and I know you could probably find something for her to do down at NJPAC. So we met with Larry Goldman. He said, Stefanie, bring your resume once you meet this guy. So I said, okay, well, so I brought my resume, and we met with Larry Goldman, and the first job that I had was a consultant up in East Orange, working with some kids there. But then NJPAC had a group of people who worked there and loved to sing. And they had been talking about doing a gospel choir at NJPAC. You know, but they didn't have anybody to be at the helm. So we were supposed to, we got together, had auditions for the choir. It was about 120 people. We had over 300 people audition, but we ended up having about 120 folks. And we were supposed to sing one time, just one time, to back up Shirley Caesar for a Martin Luther King program at NJPAC. So we started having rehearsals. Rehearsals got good. I mean, these folks, they could still sing. There was some singers in the midst. And we had the concert with Shirley Caesar. It was a great success. But we just felt that this can't be it. This can't be it. We sound too good. This can't be the end. So we stayed together. And NJPAC, we became the house choir for NJPAC at that time. They were having Martin Luther King every year, and I think one other event they had every year. I would always get to sing and pick the artists for that year. And we just stayed together. And then in 2004, I decided, it was my decision to leave NJPAC because they had been great to me. I don't want to bash them. They were fabulous. But as a preacher, I'm a preacher first before I'm anything else, I felt a little constricted. When you're on the stage in a hall and you want to preach, you feel irkling to preach, and you really can't. You gotta kind of hold yourself. So I decided for me that I was going to leave NJPAC at that time. And unbeknownst to me, my choir left as well. And they had a hard time finding somebody to take over the choir. So now Jubilation is independent, but we still have a relationship with NJPAC. You know, it's like you have a boyfriend and y'all break up. Then down the line, y'all get back together. But it's still not like it was, but you're still together. So that's what it is. So I thank God for the experience of Jubilation. I think there are about 70 or 80 still singing right now. I went to rehearsal the other week. It was about 75, 80 people still singing. So I thank God for them. But that's how I wouldn't have met Jeremy back there. And I knew all my singers, name by name and face by face. I think that's important. You don't have people standing in front of you and you don't know who they are.
That's right.
But tell us about some of the high points, because you got the Super Bowl, you've got the performance at Carnegie Hall.
Well, what happened was Rita Owens, who's a good friend of mine, I met up in Nutley many years ago, is Queen Latifah's mother. And Queen Latifah heard us sing, said, y'all sound good. I said, yeah, these folks can sing. All I'm doing is waving my hand and standing in front of them. These folks can sing. She said, why don't you come and sing with me for this? So we did the Super Bowl. We did with Ray Charles, we were the last choir to record with the icon Ray Charles, who is a pistol. I can tell you some stories about him.
Tell us one story about Ray Charles.
I don't know if I can tell it. you know, Ray, he was just a character. He was, first of all, his mouth was not nice. He smoked cigarette after cigarette when he was smoking. And he came to rehearsal with what I thought was iced tea. I thought it was iced tea till I smelled it. Okay? He was just, but I hit it off with him because I'm an old soul. You know, and he liked me and I liked him. If he didn't like you, you would know about it. You know, Jamie Foxx was really good in that movie. He had him down pat. If he didn't like you, he'd tell you and he'd cuss you out and get out of his face. One night we were doing the CD, and you can still buy the CD. It's called Ray Charles Celebrates the Gospel Christmas with the Voices of Jubilation. So they wanted him to do an extra song on the CD because they had time slots set out. The CD's gonna be this long, and they had this time left. And they said, we need Ray to do one more song. I said, well, did you ask him? They said, yes, we asked him. The producer said, we asked him, but he said no. I said, well, what are you asking me for? He already told you no. No, they said, no, Stephanie, you talk to him. See if he'll do it. See if he'll do it. I said, okay, I'll talk to him. So I went to Ray, and I said, Ray? He said, yeah, Ray. I said, would you do something just for me? He said, oh, sure, whatever you want me to do, baby. I'll do it for you. What you need? What you need? I said, would you sing one more song for me on the CD? He said, what song you want me to sing, baby? I said, would you sing Silent Night just for me on the CD? He said, well, if that's what you want me to do, I'll do it for you. So if you listen to the CD, you'll hear the song Silent Night. We did not rehearse it. We just sang it and did it. But they were happy that they got ready to do one more song. But if they had asked him, you know what he was saying.
Super Bowl 2010?
Yes. I have no knowledge of football, so you football fans, God bless you. But I was second Super Bowl, didn't know who was playing. So they told me that the Saints were playing and whoever else in 2010. So I said, since I'm a preacher, I'm going to root for the Saints. And guess what? The Saints won.
Carnegie Hall.
Yes, we did Carnegie Hall with Ray Chu, you know, the musical director Ray Chu from American Idol, and he's now with Dancing with the Stars now, I think. So we did Carnegie Hall with him, and actually I'm going to Carnegie Hall December 6th because some friends of mine are going to be over there for a night of inspiration December 6th, yeah.
Okay, back to your Newark at NJ Pack last year?
Yeah, last year, Jubilation, you know, and I wasn't able to be with them, but my associate director directs now, you know, while I'm rehabbing. He directed, and Dion, who was a friend of mine, we celebrated, Black History Month from the Middle Passage, but it had to be rescheduled because she had some problems with her foot. I think she had a fall or something, so she was rehabbing, so in June, Jubilation sang with her at NJ Pack, and I heard it was really, really wonderful.
And you also just had a group from the choir tour, and I believe has come back now from Spain.
They just came back from Spain. They did about 12 concerts. Wow. Yeah, we negotiated this deal before I had the stroke, and then while I was in the hospital, you know, I started to cancel everything, but I wanted the people to be able to experience it. You know, I didn't want to be selfish. I wanted them to still go. So they enjoyed Spain. They were there for 2 weeks and had a great time.
So what do you envision for the Jubilation Choir in the years to come?
Well, I just hope that they have many, many, many more. We have many more ministry opportunities. Traveling, you know, I never know where we're going to be until it gets close. You know, we have a schedule for this year, but people always call and things are added. Like the trip to Spain, you know, I knew about that ahead of time, but somebody would call me. Queen Latifah has called me the night before, can you all be so-and-so and so-and-so the next day? You know, that's how the industry works. They don't really plan because I don't think they go to sleep. You know, so they don't really plan what they do. They just do. So they'll call you at the last minute to do something, and hopefully you're available to do that.
Dr. Lewis, let's bring you back into the conversation here because correct me if I'm wrong here, but I look upon you as someone who did in the latter part of the 20th century with television what had been done with gospel music in the 20s, which is through radio, which is bringing the music to a wider audience. So in the 20s, gospel music got spread across the country through radio, and you were one of the people who had the foresight to be able to expand its reach even more through television. Tell us how you got to that point where television became something that not only was important to you personally, but was important for gospel music spreading across the world.
I was asked 34 years ago by, at that time it was called Connection Cable, now known as Cablevision. Mr. Phil McGriff and Dr. Banks always said to me, you should do television. And there was an opportunity to be able to do it through, at that time, as I said, Connection Cable. They came out to an event that I had, a gospel music convention in the city, and they saw the talent and they saw this great breeze, and they asked, would you be interested in doing television? But they said telly, I knew what they were saying because in England, that's what they use short television. It's television. And I said, sure. And the opportunity availed itself where we did our first broadcast at how the old Congregational Baptist Church on Burton Street near Springfield Avenue. Pastor Walker opened up his doors. There I had Savion Glover, who was just about getting ready to launch into the tap dance kid. I had his mother, I had, her name escaped me, she was a blind singer. Her name will come to me. And if you know what I'm talking about, she came out of Red Harvest, she was blind.
I see her, but I can't call her name.
Because I had her here at the library one year. It will come to me. And these people came to the program and the church was packed because this was the first time television ever came to a live, actually it was live television, ever came to a church in the city of Newark. And people were clamoring to get in, people were clamoring to be on the show. And then one day I sat down and I said, you know, this is a gold mine right here for me. But it's a great opportunity to open doors for so many undiscovered talent, to give them a platform. So people always say to me, how come you never say that? How come you never play on television? Well, I don't know. You know, my good friend, every time he opens up a show, you know, he's always going to sing. But I feel that I need to do that. I need to let others, because if it wasn't for a platform guy, a platform such as this, there would be so many other people who would never have an opportunity to be discovered. So when I realized the power of television, what it can do, and being able to not only take it in the Newark studio on Central Avenue, but also being able to take the Essex County College where I taught, using channel 48 at that time, using that channel. Again, allowing the students of Essex County College and Rutgers to come over and to put their talent on display. This is how Savion Glover, and the story is known. Savion Glover, my cousin, got his discovery because he was on my show at Essex County College. Because first he asked me, he said, cuz I want to tap dance. And I said, Savion, tap dance to what? He said, I just want to tap dance. I'm saying, well, I don't see tap dancing and gospel going hand in hand. That's just not going to work. My other cousin, the late Professor Fetty, who said, listen, let me take Savion, I'm going to do something very special and trust me. I said, okay, but that'll work. I want no letters. People did not mind sending letters to express their feelings about whatever it was they saw. The following week, they came back. Said, Savion came and I gave him the opportunity because I never wanted to say no to any young person, especially if I know their talent. And I want you to know, Freddie, who sat down and played Amazing Grace in jazz magic form, Savion Glover tapped to it. And from that show, when it aired Manhattan Cable in Manhattan, New York, I received a call from a lady whose name was Susan Ackerman. I didn't know who she was. I was on my way out to church when the phone rang, and she said, "Is this Dr. Lewis?" "Yes, it is." She said, "I have an interest in a young man who was on your show, tap dancing." And right away, she was talking about. I said, "Yes, and what about?" "I'd like to meet with him. Who is his manager?" I said, "Well, I think you need to talk to his mom." And I gave the number to him to call Yvette. And here I'm trying to rush to get out. As soon as I get into the door, the phone rang, Yvette screaming on the phone, "Do you know who this person was you were talking to?" I said, "Yvette, I don't care. I'm trying to get out. I'm going to be late getting to church." She said, "Before you go, that was Miss Susan Ackerman." "Who is Miss Susan Ackerman?" "She's a Broadway casting director." Alfonso was rolling out of the part of the tap dance kid, and she needed to get another kid in there, and she so sick, and the rest is history. So I know has done and will still do.
Absolutely. So we have a tradition in the program to open up the floor for questions or comments. I'm going to do that in a moment, but I want to ask one other question if I could, because there are some names, pivotal, seminal names of gospel music figures in Newark that we haven't talked about. So I'm going to just throw a few names out there. If you could just take, if you want, just take a moment or two just to talk about these people, so we don't leave them out of this discussion, because they certainly deserve to be in it, and they haven't been mentioned so far. So let's start off with Leon Lumpkins.
Gospel class.
Great.
Gospel class, yes.
He was taught by, and people don't know, he was taught by Professor Robert Benitez.
Open Our Eyes, this big hit that was recorded by Earth, Wind and Fire.
And he served as the minister of music at Greater Abyssinia Baptist Church for years.
And also the musical director at Perry.
That's right.
And he graduated from Arts.
And he's from Arts
High School.
Alex Bradford.
Another icon in music. Your arms are too short to box with God, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Alex was my next door neighbor. He didn't have a piano. I did. And he would come over. And sometimes Alex would come over at the weirdest times. Because he had this inspiration. Let's get on. I didn't have to ask you because I know. Yes, Alex. I said, oh, come on, stop it, come on. He was so glorified. And Alex was a unique person, just a very unique person, a very humble person, even when he starred in The Arms Are Too Short to Box with God, he still maintained his humbleness.
Also, he was in some other plays as well.
I'm sorry.
He was in some other plays as well. I mean,
Old Mary. So, no play called Old Mary.
Black Nativity.
Right.
And
Old Mary.
there's another one
Yeah,
that will come to me in a moment.
Yeah.
But what about Marie Knight, Sister Rosette's partner in the late 30s, early 50s?
I was supposed to find out some information for you, and I called my aunt, who I don't know where she is tonight, to get, because my aunt, my grandmother's family lived on Broome Street. And I remember you talking about Broome Street. So I am not familiar with Marie Knight, but I know Uncle Walter. Do you know that name?
I remember the name, yes.
Okay. But I don't know that name. I'm sorry. I mean, I don't know her. I don't know.
Now, the only two persons that would know, one is deceased, of course, and that's my aunt Anna Lundy Lewis, and Professor Robert Banks. I would have to ask him on a good day.
Right. Marie Knight was Sister Rosetta's partner in the late 40s into the early 50s. She was not a native Newarker. She was from Florida and came here. And went on the road with Sister Rosetta, became huge stars in gospel. They played all over the country, in even stadiums. They were really considered to be one of the first crossover groups from gospel to R&B. But there was a fire here in Newark that took the life of her mother and I believe her two children, and that convinced her that she had to, she was on the road most of the time with Sister Rosetta, and she had left her children with her mother here, and they had died in this fire, and at that point, I think you're talking 50, 51, 52 maybe, decided that she would retire from gospel music, and essentially did, but came back later on and became an R&B artist. After, I believe, PBS did a special on Sister Rosetta, but there was a very long stretch of time where Marie Knight did not perform at all, and I guess that's why, people really don't remember.
God. Now, there's another person who I will ask tonight, so like, she researches everything and everybody. Yes.
Okay. And let's just talk for a moment about Savoy Records, which was based here in Newark and was owned and operated by Herman Levinsky, whose grandson you can still see on PBS. T.J. Levinsky does the R&B shows.
Well, I worked for Savoy as a transcriber in the 80s.
Okay.
So, what is the guy that's the head of it now? Well, Milton Bigham is the executive director now, but it was another guy before Milton that I worked with, and another lady in the office. They were out of Elizabeth at that time. The office was in Elizabeth. And so I was blessed to get a job transcribing music. So some of the sheet music that you might buy, you'll see my name as the transcriber for the songs that we did back in the day.
Right. I believe it's in Atlanta now? Savoy's in Atlanta?
I think so, but listen.
It's under another name.
It's the premier gospel music label.
Right.
You know, and Reverend Lawrence Roberts, who I, you know, people say that I talk too much about him, but that's all right.
That's right.
Because he is I am, because he was. And Savoy Records, he was the first black gospel producer. So that's how I learned my craft and met so many wonderful people. I mean, Aretha Franklin would come to Nutley just the Sunday morning service.
Right.
You know, so.
Not just the first black gospel producer, the first black producer for a major American band.
Yeah, I think there were other black producers, but I don't know. I don't know, because, you know.
Not before Lawrence.
Yes.
Lawrence was the first.
All right, so we'll give it to him.
Yeah, it was.
Okay, we'll give it to him. Let's give it to him.
Also Lawrence was the first person who recorded gospel music live in churches. That was never heard of before. And James Cleveland did not want to record live. He said, because if you make a mistake, you can't edit it. And Lawrence said, well, we're going to trust God. And he did. And all the recordings were live.
Well, I'm going to trust God, and then we have some good probing questions out here in the audience. If anyone has a question they'd like to ask our guests, please raise your hand. We have a few minutes for a few questions. And then at the end, I'm just going to give the two of you a moment to think about this. And maybe just
listen, if I don't do this, my brother is going to kill me. I have my book here. So if you're interested in prophetic gospel music, a lot of what we talked about tonight is in this book. Okay, sweet? All right.
Okay. And I'm going to ask the two of you when we end if you could do this little collaboration for us musically. Vocally.
I don't know if I can sing anything.
The audience, do we have any questions? Someone's got to have them. Let's go with the microphone, please.
No, here. I heard you speak about Robert Banks, who I was familiar with, but Charles and Jeff Banks, as well as Carrie Smith, the Appleton Choir, the Greater Harvest Choir, from West King Street to Broome Street to 15th Avenue and so forth and so on. I rarely hear them mentioned when we're talking about the history of gospel music here in Newark.
Lord, I tried. It's Charles Banks. Charles and Jeff Banks. See, he's older than me. People are telling me. So he knows these people. I was younger, but I know of Charles and Jeff Banks because I'm a gospel music lover. And they were tremendous artists in gospel music. I have never reached perfection, but I tried.
Charles and Jeff
playing piano.
Pennsylvania, and he came and settled here,
right.
And they were the first brothers that ever started. Brothers that came together after that, like the O'Neill twins. It was the first Jeff and Charles, the Banks brothers.
In defense of myself, they were on my list. I omitted them, unfortunately. Yes.
Thanks, Guy. Jeremy Johnson, and this is such a treat, everybody. I had the privilege to be starting at New Jersey PAC at the same time. Reverend Minatee was there. So many stories. But I want you to talk about, you always say that gospel music wasn't meant to entertain. I remember that from rehearsals and those early, all the time. And talk about how you also, in addition to the African-American tradition, but you wove other traditions. On one of your CDs, you have a Japanese song that moves me so much. Just talk about a little bit how you've done that.
Well, Reverend Lawrence Roberts is the person who penned the language. Gospel music should never be used to entertain, but enlighten.
That's right.
It's good news for bad times.
That's right.
And I never forgot him saying that. And what we have to do is that when we do gospel music, and I told you it was good news, no matter what you sing, there must be good news coming from it. If the people cannot get the message of the good news, it's a waste of time, really. You know, it's a song, but it's not really a song unless there is exuding some kind of lift. A lift, because people spend each and every day, you know, downtrodden. They're going through stuff. This has happened, that has happened. So the music that we sing, if we're going to sing gospel music, it has to have a lift. No matter what songs. And we did a song called Praise the Lord, Praise the Lord in Japanese. And, you know, we were able to weave our gospel sound into that song. Homeyo, Yesuo, Shunomina. I can't. What's the next line, Jeremy? But anyway, you know, and so it's Japanese, but you can still feel that it's saying, praise the Lord. And that's what has to happen.
One more. Celeste?
One of my choir members.
Okay, here she is. It's going to be good.
I am honored to have known both of these wonderful speakers, guests this evening, for many, many years, and influenced by both of them. Albert and I have worked on numerous programs over the years during my tenure at the city. And as Stephanie just mentioned, I sang in her choir. She allowed me to sing in her choir because I ain't the greatest voice. But what a great time at being at her first practice of Nutley and being in the young adult choir. My question is, what about the young folk coming up? You have, there's Joshua Nelson. We have to talk about Joshua and also a Arts High person. And are there others who are on the rise who are following in your wonderful footsteps?
Well, of course, Joshua is keeping the Hellier Jackson alive. Because if you hear him, you hear Haley. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to hear Joshua Nelson, but he is the splitting image. And a lot of people could not believe that he plays and sings like her. But for the young people, and I said this when I was teaching in high school, you know, I understand that music changes and it evolves, but the message cannot be lost. If I hear a song and can't find the message, then I have a problem with that. It must be authentic. Gospel music is authentic. It is good news. So it must have a message. Reverend Roberts used to say, contemporary music is just what it is. It's temporary with the C-O-N taken off. You know, it's just temporary, but the other music, you've got to have a message. And if there's no message, it's a waste of time, in my opinion.
I look at the Richard Small ones, and those people who take contemporary music, but they add such powerful biblical terms. Oh, I will lift my eyes to the King. My eyes to you. And those songs like that have gospel in it. Even though it's now, no matter when, how long it was written, to now when you hear it, just like we heard that music tonight. And I told you that was sung about 50 years ago, but it still had power in it. Because that's foundational music. That's foundational music. That's the kind of music that'll get you through the day. The kind of music that'll help you look forward to tomorrow. The kind of music that when you're going through personal situations, you can still sing that and it gives you deliverance in your spirit and in your mind. The Voices of Victory of the WGMA celebrate 30 years of singing. These are older people who've been with me for 47 years and have become a choir in 30 years. The oldest is 92 years old, who still drives her car and picks up the other girls who are 89 and bring them to rehearsal. And when those girls stand up to sing, Dora Johnson is considered our Lena Horn. She looks like Lena, sound like Lena. Yes. I even flew with Brother Flack. I said, Brother, when we were at the Prudential for the Gospel Fest, I said, Brother, come in. I want you to see Lena. Oh. She said, what? Lena, and she walked in and she saw Dora. And she said, oh, Lena, with the kisses on, and she looked at her and she said, you ain't Lena, but you look like Lena. I said that to say this, when she stands up and she sings, don't know why, there's no sun, it's Lena Horn all over again. So those songs have power, and those seniors know how to execute it.
We've got to find a way to reach out to our young people. Because a lot of them, they have preconceived notions that this music is old, you know, and you can't say nothing to me, what you talking about. We need their energy. We need their zeal. We have to find a way to educate them so that the old stuff translates to the new stuff, but it's mixed. You know what I'm saying? I don't want them to become turned off, which is what we see a lot now. The young people get turned off very easily. So we have to find a way to educate them so that they will appreciate the old stuff and incorporate it into what they're doing now.
Okay, so a couple of housekeeping matters before we end tonight. Again, the final program, December 7th, myself and Mayor Baraka right here, 6 o'clock. Also, Stephanie has her book available tonight, as I have my book available. The famous, the familiar, and forgotten 350 notable Newarkers. Which includes these two people on stage and most of the people we spoke about tonight, Reverend Roberts, Leon Lumpkins, Marie Knight, Alex Bradford, and any other number of gospel performers from Newark. And finally, I would like to ask if we could, I don't know, maybe I'm imposing here, but there is precedent for song at these programs. Back in May, when we had Mayor James and Mayor Gibson here, we sang Happy Birthday to Mayor Gibson. So, is there something we can
Thank you, Jesus. Come on now. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus.